If you've never washed a cross-stitch piece before, it might not seem that valuable. But let's take a look at this piece I finished in 2020 and evaluate the state of it. As you can see, I never washed this piece. I didn't even remove the tape from the edges, and I taped it directly to the mat. Because I didn't wash and block the piece, it's a little bit crooked. You can see the edges don't quite make straight lines. Additionally, this tape is right on the fabric. This will lead to discoloration over time and might even damage the stitching. Finally, there is significant discoloration where I held the fabric with my left hand while I stitched in a hoop. Let's see what we can do to clean this up. To prepare for washing the piece, the first step is to remove all of the tape that protected the edges. Do this carefully to reduce the amount of fraying, especially if you don't have a lot of additional fabric to work with around the edge of your piece. For something like this, which has been taped for about 4 years at this point, it is very sticky and hard to pull off. Hopefully you'll do this earlier so that you don't have all of these strings stuck in the tape. Once all of that has been removed, we're ready to wash. Fill a bucket that's large enough to hold your piece with filtered water. Add a small amount of laundry detergent, preferably something that doesn't have dyes or fragrances. Use your hands to mix up the detergent and then gently submerge your piece. Once the fabric is wet, you can agitate the water to get the soap working, and even scrub at areas of the fabric that don't have any stitching. This helps to get out all of the hand oils and grime that the fabric picked up while you worked on your project. You do want to be careful around the areas with stitching, but for something like this with significant discoloration, I'm actually going to add laundry detergent directly to this stain. With a gentle laundry detergent like this, it should be safe. One thing that I would like to note here, I only recommend washing pieces if you have stitched them with color-fast thread like DMC floss. With some of the cheaper brands of floss, the colors can bleed when they get wet, which would absolutely ruin your piece. Once your piece seems at least mostly clean, you'll need to rinse out the soap. To avoid dripping water everywhere, you can gently remove some of the liquid by folding the fabric in half and using 2 fingers like a squeegee, sliding down the edges to press out the water. Place the damp fabric to the side and dump out your soapy water in a sink. Return the fabric to the empty bucket and then pour more clean water on top of it. Dunk and rinse the fabric a few times to wash out any lingering soap. Then repeat your finger squeegee method to remove excess water. At this point, I can still see some discoloration, but it's a lot better than before, so I think I'm happy and ready to dry this piece. Place the damp fabric on a clean towel. Fold that towel in half and make sure it's not bunched up underneath. Then, loosely roll the towel and gently press to release some of the water. The goal is just to reduce the excess moisture, so you don't want to make a super tight roll or wring the fabric, as this will introduce really intense wrinkles that are going to be hard to iron out. Unroll your towel to check on the piece. In this case, I felt like the fabric was still pretty wet, so I moved it over to a drier section of the towel and repeated the process. When the fabric is no longer dripping wet, the next step is to block out the piece. To block your piece, you'll need a ruler, small pins, and something you can pin the fabric to. A square is not required, but it can be very helpful. The goal of blocking is to even out a piece that got stretched while you worked on it. You'll start with what I call a rough block. Using your square or ruler, check the corners and edges, then gently tug on the fabric to begin nudging it into a more rectangular shape. Blocking is not strictly necessary in many cross-stitch pieces, but it can be very helpful for a piece like this that was stretched over time and is now misshapen. When I feel that the piece is closer to the rectangle that it should be, I swapped my acrylic quilting ruler and begin pinning one edge. Technically, I should be starting from the center of this edge rather than the corner, but we all have our flaws. The purpose of these pins is to prevent warping or shrinking as the fabric dries. I place them every inch or so, approximately 1 inch from the edge of the cross-stitch work. Here you can see the thing that I really like about using the clear ruler. It doesn't block me from seeing the edge as I place the pins, and I'm able to keep an eye on how straight that edge is throughout the pinning process, so I can make small adjustments to make sure this little section is still straight. When you've finished pinning the first side, you can move on to the next. In my case, first I had to stretch out the fabric a little bit to loosen some minor bunching that happened while rolling the fabric in the towel. You'll use your square or ruler to ensure the edge is making a right angle and pin the fabric just as you did before, approximately 1 inch from the edge every inch or so, tugging and straightening the fabric wherever you need to ensure that straight line. The rest of the pinning should be fairly straightforward. You'll repeat the process on the opposite edge and then the last side. After this, I recommend waiting a bit until your fabric is mostly dry. Ideally, I should be recommending that you leave it for a few hours or even overnight, but I don't have that kind of patience, so I only wait about 20 minutes before I start ironing. To protect your cross stitch, I recommend setting your iron at a medium heat such as blend. Find a piece of 100% cotton fabric that is color fast to use as a protective layer between the iron and the stitches. Because I'm impatient and didn't wait for my piece to fully dry, I did take a first pass ironing before removing the pin. If you follow my bad habits, do be careful, don't iron over your pins, especially if they have a plastic head. You do not want to melt your pins onto your fabric. After that, I finally found the patience to allow my piece to dry overnight, so it was time for the final ironing to clean up the minor bubbles and little marks that the pins left behind. Again, I set my iron to a medium heat and used a cotton cloth to protect the stitches during the ironing process. Here I can iron all the way to the edges, make sure that everything is beautiful, flat, and neat. And that's it. This is the piece fully washed, blocked, and ironed. Here we compare to where we started, and it might not be perfect, but I can see a huge difference. I am so happy with how this turned out.